Hi everybody, welcome back to Gina Quilts. I've been missing y'all. It's been a while since I've done a video and I am ready to get started again. So I wanted to bring up just a couple things. One is I know a lot of people did the Merry Coriander Christmas sew along, and my quilt shop, the local quilt shop here in Shreveport, it's called So Chic, is doing that sew along, but they're using the Springbrook fabric. And so this is our first block. It's a block of the month and I just love it. So I just wanted to share it with everybody in case other people had the book and they wanted to do the Springbrook collection, this quilt in the Springbrook collection also. So that's the first thing I wanted to show y'all. And then also I got my quilts back from the Long Armor. And well, I got my quilt and my table runner back from the Long Armor. And this is what it looks like. And this is the backing that I chose. And I got a, let's see if you can see, but it's loops and hearts quilting on it. So I still have to put the binding on. I haven't done that yet. And then I'll show y'all my table runner. Here's my table runner. I just love how it turned out. Isn't it so pretty? And I chose the flowers for the backing, and it also has the same quilting, but this one is done with red thread. The other one was done with like a cream, like a pearl. All right, so this week we're going to do something a little different. My sister-in-law asked if we could do something with scraps. So I thought the first thing that we would do is I'll show y'all how I cut my scraps up, because I finished a quilt. I'm going to pop a picture of it up. And it's the Farm Girl Vintage 2, and I used the Early Bird Bonnie and Camille collection, and I used a fat quarter bundle, so I have quite a bit of fat quarter left. And so I'm gonna show y'all what I do with those, and then in the upcoming weeks we'll see what kind of different projects we can do. I was gonna show y'all one thing that I had done. I made the quilt, I think it's called All My Heart, but it's the quilt in the Bonnie and Camille new book called the Quilt Bee book. So I made this quilt. It's actually what gave me the inspiration for the quilt that we made previously. But when this half square triangle right here, when I sewed this, I did the same thing that we had done on the quilt that we previously made, and I went ahead and sewed a second line and to make another half square triangle out of this, and I took all those half square triangles and made this quilt. It's just a small little quilt, but it's basically a freebie, because otherwise I probably would have maybe tossed that fabric, or actually in the past I definitely would have tossed it. So I was pretty excited about that. And then this fabric I just had already, and I gotta put binding on this too, because I just got this back from the quilter. I'm not really sure what this quilting is called, but it's really beautiful. I don't know if y'all can see it. So I ironed a couple of fat quarters that were left over. So when I'm working on a project, I have these clear boxes. You can actually see them here in my closet. And here is the one for the quilt that we finished. So I'll have this box, and I'll keep my receipts so I know how much each quilt costs, and also all the scraps for that in this box until I'm completely finished with the quilt. So I've put the binding on and it's just 100% finished. And then I'll take everything that's left in this box and cut it up and put it in my scrap bins. So that's kind of where I am on the Farm Girl Vintage 2 quilt. I do still have to bind it. It's at the Long Armors now, but I know that I'm not going to use any of these fat quarters for that. So I have them all here in this basket, ready to be cut up into scraps or folded back up to keep as a fat quarter if I don't have enough fabric cut off of it. I use the Lori Holt method. If you have her planner, you know how she likes to keep hers in baskets. So I have like a 1.5 inch basket, and then this is for the strips, and then 3.5 the strips, and then down here 7 in the strips, and then I have the 2.5, 5, and 10 over here. And so that's what I use. And then I'll just show y'all what I do. And obviously you don't have to follow this method. You can continue doing your scraps however you want to, but for anybody that's looking for a way to use their scraps, store their scraps, this could be something that you might like to do. So I just picked a few of the fat quarters out to show you how I do it. But this fat quarter, if you see, is barely used. It just has this little bitty piece cut out. So something like this, where I still have most of the fat quarter, I'm going to keep as a fat quarter. So I'm going to fold it. I fold them, so I'll fold it in a quarter, and then in another quarter like that, and then I'll fold that in half, and then I'll put this whole side on the inside. I'll fold that in half, and then in half again. And then actually I fold it in half again, and I have one of those rolling carts. Pat Sloan calls it her sewing assistant, and that's actually where I store my fat quarters, and I store them by color. So I would put this in with the whites. So this piece is smaller and not big enough for me to continue to use as a fat quarter, in my opinion. So I'm going to cut it down. So now I'm going to move the camera down to look at my cutting board so y'all can see what I'm doing. Okay, so when I start cutting off of my fat quarters, I always like to have the selvage on the right. I'm right-handed, so I cut from the cut side inwards towards the selvage. So this is my selvage here, and the first thing I'm going to do is take my ruler and see if I can get a 10-inch square out of this, and I cannot. So the next size that I have is a 7-inch, and I can get a 7-inch square from this. So I'm going to flip this around. Now I'll put I'm just really kind of eyeballing it because I don't have like quite a straight edge here. And I'm going to trim. Then I'm going to flip this around because now I have these two straight edges. I'm going to line those up on my 7-inch. And then I'm going to trim these two sides. All right. So there's a 7-inch. Now I could get another 7-inch out of this, so I'm gonna do that. And it's gonna make it kind of look wonky, but that's okay. So I cut those two sides, and I'm gonna flip this around. And trim the other two sides. So I'm lining up my straight edges of my fabric that I just cut on the 7-inch line. I'm going to trim this. Now the smallest size that I keep is the 1.5 inches. I know some people keep the 1 inch, so I mean some of these blocks even go down to having a 3/4 inch cut, so you can keep any size you want, but I keep a 1.5 inch, and this does not quite make it to 1.5 inches, so I'm actually going to toss this out. All right, now this gets kind of interesting, right? You have this kind of wonky looking piece. So the next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to look here and see if what I can get here. So I'm pretty sure the best I can get is 1.5 inches. I don't think I can get 2.5, and I cannot. So what I'll do is make sure that my 1.5 inch line is here, you know, inside of the fabric. And then get as close to this selvage as I can. And then basically I'm just going to cut the selvage off. I'm going to flip this around, and we're going to make this into a 1.5 inch strip. And I'm going to save it in my 1.5 inch strip container or basket. So we're lining that straight edge we just cut on our 1.5 inch line. And we're going to save this as a strip like this. Now inside of my baskets do not look as pretty as what you see Lori Holt's look like. Mine are more messy. Okay, so then let's see what this is, okay? So this is just a little over 3. So we're going to cut these down to 2.5. Okay, we already have a straight line here. So we're going to use that straight line that we cut, and I'm going to cut this down. There's 2.5. And now we have this. And this is 3.5. So it's just a little short of 3.5, y'all. So I'm going to cut it down to 2.5. There's probably a much better way to do this. And if you have any suggestions, please feel free to leave a comment. I would love to know. We're going to cut this little piece off. And cut it down to 1.5 inch square. All right, so that fat quarter is done. So now, when I get ready to do something scrappy, I have a 1.5 inch square, I have 1.5 inch strip in case that needs to be longer, and 2 2.5 inch strips, and then 2 7 inch squares. which can be cut down, you know, to 3.5-inch squares, or even smaller. You know, you could have a 5-inch square and then some 2.5-inch strips. Well, actually you can't. That math doesn't make sense, guys, but you know what I mean. Okay, so then I have this one that's like just super small, and we can't get a 1.5-inch strip from this, and so all that we're gonna really save is like this part. We're gonna see what we can get out of this little part. So I'm actually just gonna go ahead and cut that off, toss it, cut that off, toss it, and let's see, we can get 3.5 inches. So that's what we're gonna go for. We're gonna cut this down here and cut this down here. And then I'm gonna cut this into a square. Okay, and then this is 1.5 inches, so cut this down, and I'm going to make these into squares. Okay, so that's kind of what that looks like. So if you have any, you know, scraps laying around, just cut them down. You know the sizes that you use most often. I just went with the sizes that Lori Holt uses, because I really love Lori Holt patterns and I use them a lot, and especially for scrappy quilts. And so cut down all the rest of yours if you have any, and then next week we will do a project with our scraps and see what kind of things we can come up with. Thank you so much for watching. If you like this video, please give it a thumbs up. Also, subscribe so you can see more videos like this, and I will see y'all next week.